Good morning, everyone. I, Dr. Jourdain Singh, your host, welcome you all to the Sunday English speaking series powered by Shubh Language Academy, a platform where we enhance our English language skills. Today, we have our special guest with us, Mr. Miguel Jourdain. Hello, we welcome you to our session. Thank
Good
you
morning.
so much. Good morning. Hello. Thank you so much to have accepted our invitation for being the guest of the day. And to let our participants know, Miguel is joining from New York and it's 12:30 a.m. over there. Thank you once again, Miguel, for staying up for us.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. This means a lot to us. And I'd like to introduce our guest to our participants first and foremost. Miguel grew up in the international community between New York City, New England, and Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. The experience of having encountered fellow students from diverse cultures throughout his education has been a source of wonder and enrichment, as well as an inspiration that has guided his varied career path from the beginning. After more than a decade in the field of luxury real estate, specializing in international clients, his career took a turn into the field of language liaison services. Miguel has been a Spanish and English language consultant in the legal court system for the US government, for international banks and Fortune 500 companies. Wow, what a versatile background you have. I should say your talent knows no bounds. And this is the reason for our session, which is titled Diverse Cultural Experiences, a Catalyst for Personal and Social Transformation. So everyone, feel free to ask questions in the end because this is a platform wherein we can not only enrich our English language, but we get to know about our experts, professional and personal journeys that inspire us, that help us to take our career path as well in some different direction at all. All right, so to begin with, Miguel, we would like to know about your childhood. So if you could talk us through how your early years as a kid were and where did you spend your childhood?
I spent my childhood in the Dominican Republic. I was born in New York City. My parents were here actually on a business trip, and I was born unexpectedly early. And I was raised in the Dominican Republic. It's a tropical island in the Caribbean, about 4 hours away from New York City. Um, I went to school, we studied English there, but I was not really exposed to the English language until I was about 12, 13 years old when I was sent off to boarding school in Massachusetts. And I was kind of just thrown in there because that was my father's philosophy. That's how he taught me how to swim as well. He threw me in the water. um, Throughout my school career, I was able to meet people from different parts of the world. It just so happens that it was the kind of school that had students from different places. Likewise, my college was that way. Um, After school, I started my career in financial services, which many people did in my generation, which then led me into real estate. I spent some years in real estate. I specialize in international clients, especially from Spain and from the Spanish-speaking countries. I had already had experience actually helping my father to translate contracts and so on. So it was kind of an easy transition. And after some years of doing that, that led me to what I'm doing now, which is liaison services, sitting in between companies, sitting in the court when things need to be interpreted, and so on and so forth. I also interpret contracts when they need to be interpreted. Once they come to an agreement, I'm the person that has to review the contracts to make sure that they match the English and the Spanish contracts.
Right, great. I think very beautifully you have put across your dad's philosophy that if one has to learn swimming, one has to jump in the water. So I
When
think
he's
that is, I think that that's very interesting of the fact that the hands-on experience, something that you have to do all by yourself, you have to do it. And when you do it, you get through that thing as well. Same happened with you when you're talking about English as a language. So when you moved at an age of 12, 13 to Massachusetts for your school, how was that journey? How was that shift? Because you had your values and tradition of Dominican Republic, and when you moved to Massachusetts for your school, that's it. That's how you moved ahead, right, Miguel?
I was very lucky that people were kind to me. I find that whatever culture you find yourself in, there are every kind of person exists in every culture. And so you find someone that reminds you of your auntie. And that person may be the one. Usually that's what it is. Wherever you find yourself, the most important thing is interpersonal contact. That's part of jumping into it. And little by little, you start to pick things up.
Absolutely. I think little by little, that is the essence of learning, that it doesn't happen overnight. Slowly and steadily, you move ahead and you pick up things, and that shapes your personality. So, if since you were learning English at your school, you already learned it in Dominican Republic, but when you were totally soaked and immersed in that English culture around you, how was it as a young learner, as a teenager? Because our Indian learners are also having some challenges at times when we are surrounded by English and we want to move ahead with that. How difficult was it for you, or was it easy? And how did you cope with the situation? If you can try and travel for us a little bit.
I'm sure it was difficult, but I don't remember it as difficult. Over time, you get comfortable. The most important thing is to have patience with yourself, to center yourself, to sit with yourself and realize that things will come, not to try to force things. Things will come, things will get clear. The thing is to allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to observe, and try not to judge, and things will come.
Right. I think that's a great learning that you're talking about, to be patient with oneself. When it comes to learning languages, when it comes to doing any kind of work, I think we have to be patient with the whole process. It's important for us to sit and to center ourselves. And of course, when you talk about making mistakes, that is something that is inevitable. And we have to observe, and we have to see if things are going in the right direction. Then moving ahead accordingly can make a lot of sense for us. I'll just check with our expert if Miguel, can you hear me? Dear learners, dear participants, am I audible to you all? Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Right.
sir.
All right. I think our expert is experiencing some technical glitch at his end, so we'll wait for a while for him so as to connect back. But I think what Miguel is saying is absolutely important for all of us to understand that being patient, sitting with yourself at times, it's important to have a monologue. You have to talk to yourself. You have to center yourself. You have to, at times when we are navigating, even with our GPS, you have to click the button recenter or center. It brings you back to the position. So this recentering is very important. And it helps to get back the direction, which at times get lost in the whole process. I got a message from our expert. So our expert is going to rejoin. So we'll carry it on once he rejoins. All right, so we have Miguel with us. Yeah, Miguel, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think you had a technical glitch, perhaps. Yeah, could you just unmute, Miguel? We cannot hear you. Yes.
I'm sorry, friends.
No,
I'm back.
yeah, you're back. No, absolutely. See, where there's a will, there's a way. And even technical glitches, they cannot stop us. So, as Shubhashish was talking about the kind of platform we have with technology and everything, there would be glitches. But a willing heart can always overcome them. So we're just talking about the point that you beautifully mentioned, Miguel, that patience is the key to success. You have to be patient. You have to sit with yourself. I think sitting with oneself and doing a monologue with oneself as to what have I traveled, what are my shortcomings, and what are my strengths, that does help you to recenter yourself. And what you very interestingly said, which is indeed a motivation for all of us, is to make mistakes. One should not shy away from the fact that one is allowed to make mistakes, because mistakes are the stepping stones to your success. Yeah. If you can delve a little bit on that, Miguel, making mistakes, because in India, I'll just quickly give you a little idea that we are really intimidated of the fact that, oh, I should not make mistakes when I speak English, especially. I'll be considered someone who has less of knowledge. So can you delve a little bit on it as to why making mistakes make a lot of sense in any kind of learning?
Making mistakes is important, is essential to any learning. You have to make mistakes. You have to allow yourself to make mistakes. It's a mistake. The biggest mistake is to be too perfectionist. Um, People will always correct you if they see that you're trying, and that's the only way to learn. One has to be calm and not worry too much about things. Um, Not only to sit with yourself and center yourself, but also to sit with others. Um, they want to hear your mistakes because they want to help you. Um,
True. Yeah.
so
I think that's again very fascinating of the fact what you say that you have to surround yourself with people who would push you towards the path of correction and betterment. I think that's how we have to surround ourselves with people who are there for our good, and they're always there because that kind of a positive feedback, a positive correction is needed for all of us to grow in our lives. So I think that really makes sense, Miguel. Thank you. Moving ahead, because I think we are going to the philosophical part of it, and since it's one of your core areas as well, we were fascinated by the little clip that you sent us across about your interest in philosophy, you being into business, and of course, you're a language expert and your special love for India. So coming on to the point, we would like to know a little bit about how this attraction for India began for you, and what was it like in the initial part, and how has it grown over the years? So if you could talk a little bit about this Indian Connect.
on my first trip to India, I went there with my wife. She has friends in India. She spent some years in India when she was a young person, and when I found that something that had been on my bedroom wall as a child, the Taj Mahal, was not far from me, it was very special for me because even in Dominican Republic, growing up as a child, this is a big symbol of love all over the world. And
True.
this is something that I was able to feel not only when I went to see the Taj Mahal, but we talked about immersing oneself and allowing oneself to make mistakes. I got lost in Jaipur. I went looking for some things, some supplies. And the thing about it is that's when I really fell in love with India because all along the way, even though I was lost and without any access to a cell phone, I had a cell phone that was not connected to the internet. The society took care of me. I really got to learn what it is like. Um, it was the most beautiful experience to be lost in Jaipur. On the way to where I was going, every time I stopped someone for assistance, if they didn't know where I was going, they asked someone else, and someone asked someone else, and then someone gave me a hot spot. I began to feel so cared for that I didn't even want to go home. I was happy to be lost, and eventually they led me home as well. I was able to be lost. I was able to find where I was looking for, and then I was able to get home. Uh, Basically, allowing myself to be embraced by the people in the city, and it was just the most heartwarming experience.
Right. Oh, I think you have a beautiful story to narrate to us. Thank you so much for that experience that you are sharing with us. And indeed, I think the warmth is contagious and it is mutual. I think when we dissipate the same, we receive the same. So, and that's how the world moves ahead. And so I think you have had some beautiful memories spending here in India and in Jaipur, especially. Also, I'd like to know a little bit about some cultural shocks, if at all you had any, Miguel, when you were in India, since you have lived in Dominican Republic and then you have moved to the US and you have seen those countries. So, anything that you felt was different, it could be a positive shock. It can be something that really, it was you were taken aback by it. So, was there anything that you felt in India, in Jaipur, in Rajasthan, or
Well, The,
in
the only
country?
shock the only shock that really comes to mind, this is a very positive shock. Just like I mentioned before, I felt at ease after only a few days in India because I felt that I would always find help. People were open-hearted. Um, I began to feel, um, I don't know how to describe it,
Mhm.
embraced. Um,
Right.
I began to feel like there was no worry about. it almost felt like I don't need to worry because the Indian people will take care of me wherever I go. If I need something, I know that people are willing to help me. And that it was the most incredible, the best culture shock that one can imagine.
Wow. I think this is the hospital, the Indian people are hospitable. Here, I would like to talk about a point, Miguel, because it's not everyone's experience. When they visit India, they would feel a lot of people across around them, and that scares them at times. And they would not be open to these kind of changes which other people are trying to offer to them in terms of help or any kind of assistance. How do you see this as your own personality part? Because you have been to other countries as well. So I do understand that you liked it and you appreciated it, but there's something that comes from your personality as well, because everyone would not accept these kind of helps that are offered randomly. People would be a little skeptical, they would be unsure. But you, how do you see it? Traveling across the globe or growing in Dominican Republic, that country, are there certain values and traditions that have shaped your personality that today you have that openness of accepting and being tolerant to everything that comes your way? How do you see
Well,
that?
the Dominican Republic is a very traditional society, somewhat like India. There's a very kind of set hierarchical rules. We respect our elders. We behave in a certain way towards people who are older than us, so on and so forth. This is something that was a big culture shock coming from there to the United States, where things are different. It's more individualistic. There's this kind of different relationship between generations and so on. But all along the way, also in my travels in Europe and in the other countries that I visited, like I mentioned before, I came to realize that in every group, in every society, there's every type of person. And it so happens that you mentioned in a place like India, sometimes people are overwhelmed because there's so many people around and so on and so forth. Throughout my life, I learned to center myself when I was learning English in New England, for example, be calm and center myself and realize that everyone is just another human being. Likewise, in India, I was not overwhelmed. I was not intimidated. I knew that all the people around me were my fellow human beings. And if I'm calm and I'm centered, and I allow myself to make mistakes, I know that I'm not always going to be understood. If I cannot be understood with my words, I'm understood with my hands or with my eyes. And you look into the eye of a fellow human being. So for me, it was not a negative shock. It was actually, I felt embraced. I felt comfortable, and I felt at ease surrounded by the people. Because I had learned that lesson some time ago, that we're all human beings. It just happened to be a greater volume of human beings. And in the case of India, more people willing to give me help and to give me an experience and to give me a conversation and to tell me about their lives, which is how one is enriched. That's what we're here to do. We're here to enrich each other, to learn from each other, to experience each other. That's what life is about in the end. That's what you're taking with you. You're not going to take the riches. You're not going to take the gold. You're going to take the interactions that you had with fellow human beings.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think very well said, Miguel. That really justifies the topic for the day, which is diverse cultural experiences, a catalyst for personal and social transformation. I think the transformation that happens is with these exchanges that we delve into. It can be as true as someone with whom we are interacting in person in one's country. It can be a virtual one that we are having it, but the reality or the authenticity of this doesn't fade away for the fact that it is in virtual mode. But we get to listen to you, your experiences, and how people shape up their personality with the interactions that they have in their childhood, the countries that they visit, the people to whom they talk to. So everything shapes it up in the longer run. So I think that is also an important aspect of the fact that people embrace other cultures and other people easily. They don't have prejudice, they don't have stereotypes for them. So that openness, that acceptance should also be there. And I think with passage of time, people develop that. That brings me to our other question, another question, Miguel, because you are an expert in the field of translation. So how do you think it is important to understand the other culture to apt for doing the apt translation? Because when we translate certain things from one language, the source language, to the target language, because our learners here, they also move into it at times when they are Hindi phones, they are speaking Hindi and they would like to say something in English, this translation happens. So if you could throw some light on it as to why is it important to understand the other parameters, which is not the linguistic part of it, but other parameters that come into play that help you make the right translation. So why is it important? How can it be done? And what are the other cultural parameters that one should be aware of? If you can throw some light on that.
There are definitely cultural nuances that one has to be aware of. For example, there are certain countries, like my wife's country, Germany, where things are more casual. For example, you would call someone's parents by their first name. You cannot do that in Dominican Republic. You would have to call them sir, and you would have to call them by their last name. Those are some of the nuances, things that have to be taken into account when one is interpreting from one language to the other. Even if it's even if I'm interpreting, many times I have this when I'm doing, especially in the courts, when I'm interpreting from the attorneys and they're speaking to someone who's on trial or something like that, I have to take into account their way of communicating and their way of communicating. The way of communicating of both sides, if they call them by the first name and this person is an elderly man that happens to be from a Latin country, he's an elderly person, I know that I cannot speak to him the way that they're speaking to him. I have to translate it through the cultural lens. And I have to say, they'll say, well, Michael, tell us how you did this. And then I have to turn around and say, please, sir, please, sir, Mr. So-and-so, if you would be so kind as to give us some of your experiences. It's a very different way of communicating. And one has to switch from one to the other. That's the best example I can come up with on a moment's notice. I wish I could bring something else. There's also things that are lost in the translation. One has to take into account the cultural context in advertising. I've also done a lot of work for companies that sell food products, for example. And they'll tell me, Miguel, here we have this breakfast cereal. And we very much want to tap into the market here, this Spanish-speaking market. And, you know, our cereal is crunchy and delicious. And I say, well, I have to tell them, this is not something that's going to sell to this particular culture. This is not a culture that appreciates food that crunches. We have to find something else. We have to say, it has a certain flavor or something else. We cannot say this is not a selling point to this culture. Sometimes there are things that are not quite understood, that one has to have a little bit of knowledge of the culture. For example, to Indians, I don't know if crunchy is something that is particularly appealing. I know that, for example, in India, people don't particularly like to eat green salads. So I don't know if that's a particularly a selling point. If I say to them, oh, well, you know, this restaurant specializes, I would have to emphasize on the other dishes, not the dishes that include the green salads with the, you know, the Indians feed to the animals. So
True. No, I think very interesting examples you're putting across, Miguel. This is the alertness of a translator, or I would just sum it up by saying an individual who knows as to how the world operates and largely how the cultures operate. So this awareness is very important, and I think sessions like this, they also help us to shape our thought processes, and they also help us to understand how the people in the different parts of the country they move ahead in their lives. So when you give this example of when the person was asked certain questions, and when you were translating it, you had to put certain elements which were native and authentic to that person's culture, which you were aware of. And I think that sets the context for the other person to not only understand it in a better way, but also this person has that respect and understanding. And I'm sure if it were to be said in the same way as the original part of it, then we would not get the right responses. But when you tweak it in a way which goes directly to the heart of the other person, you get the response in the right way which is expected. I think that presence of mind, one, and that knowledge of the culture does serve the purpose, and it really helps you to make the thing go in the right direction. So that was great. And at the
Indeed,
same time, yes.
indeed, indeed.
And also the examples that you rightly mentioned, that when the advertising and the marketing people, they want to push their products into some new cultures, they have to have an understanding of those new cultures. I'm reminded of an example, a very classic example of selling Barbie dolls in Japan. I think
Mhm.
that I don't know, it comes as an example from a lot of experiences. People talk about it, that they were not a selling product at all in Japan, because those little girls couldn't identify themselves to those Barbie dolls. So one has to understand the kind of appearance that culture has, the kind of need that culture has, the society has, and things have to be planned accordingly. What works in culture A might not necessarily work in culture B. So that awareness, that exposure people should have, especially when they are into advertising or marketing, and even for that matter, we as individuals, when we move ahead in some other, because of this multicultural approach that we have, even if we don't travel abroad, we have people of different cultures and ethnicities around us, and how to deal with them, how to talk to them, it becomes important for us to know where do they come from. For example, what you rightly mentioned, taking people's first name to address them might be taken otherwise in certain cultures, and you have to give respect to them, because if you feel it from your heart, you have to show it as well. You would say sir or madam, and you would take their last name. So I think these are certain things which kind of are underestimated at times, but they play a significant role in fostering relationships with people. So that was a great input, Miguel. Thank you. So I think all our
Thank
yeah. So I think all our English learners, you would be also paying attention to these kind of aspects, because it's just not the language part of it. Every time we push this point forward, that language is just the medium. You have to scaffold it, you have to strengthen it with the emotions and the values that you have and the understanding that you have for the other culture. I think that also separates you and distinguishes you from the other regular speakers. I think if we are aware of that, we make an effort towards that, then it would be appreciated in a better way than if it were happening in the regular way. So I think we as learners, we have to be conscious learners, because we have to be conscious as to what the need of the hour is, how the other person wants us to interact with that person. That approach should also be taken up. So I think this discussion is going very interesting, Miguel, with your inputs. Well, we would. I wanted to put across this question, but I think you've already responded about that, because you are also an expert in simultaneous interpretation. Can you give a little idea as to what this process is? Because we are at times unaware of what the simultaneous interpretation is, and the example that you gave, if you can deliberate once again on the same. How would you do it? How do you do it normally?
Simultaneous interpretation involves concentration. One has to listen to what's being said and repeat it exactly, almost at the same time. When it comes to certain things, business meetings, or when it has to do with law, one begins to learn to sort of anticipate what's being said, because there's a certain vocabulary. There's legal English, there's business English, and one begins to kind of learn to anticipate. But it's something that requires a lot of concentration, because one has to be accurate. Well, I don't know what else to say about it. As someone is speaking, one has to concentrate, listen to what's being said, and repeat it.
Right.
almost at the same time. The thing, though, is that there's a trick to it because of what we talked about before. The different cultures, some things are lost in translations. There are things that cannot be said in the same way. There are things that to be said, you can say it in 2 words in one language, but it takes 7 words in the other language to say. So the rhythm of it is tricky, especially if someone is speaking at a certain pace. One has to learn to be able to sometimes anticipate what the end of that sentence is going to be, knowing that what has just been said is going to take a little longer to interpret, and be able to get that information out while listening for the next thing that's coming from the person that's speaking. But it's something like every skill. It's something that comes with time, and it's something that you have to give yourself the chance to make mistakes. If you're hired for a specific, and you cannot make mistakes, there comes, for certain things, mistakes are not allowed. But while you're learning, you have to make mistakes. You have to jump into it, and that's the only way to learn it. Without fear. Let go of fear. It doesn't
True.
serve you. Do not be intimidated. Do not be afraid. Just jump into it, and usually things will work out over time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it seems to be too challenging. I mean, doing it on the spot, then and there, your brain has to work like a machine. It has to be accurate. It has to be quick. You have to have the cultural nuances at the right place. You have to keep the length of things what are being said in the right proportion. It should not be overly done or underly done. So I think it's a technique, but what you rightly mentioned is it's a technique that is practiced over and over again, and you master it. And then not being fearful is also one of the key factors that helps you to move ahead in the right direction.
Yeah, it's like sport. It's
Right,
very much like sport. It becomes in sport, the athletes will tell you that there's something called muscle memory.
right.
Uh, Things become kind of automatic. You basically will turn into a machine for a little while there.
Yeah. No, I think all our English learners are in the process of the same because somewhere, in the brains, we are translating from English to our foreign languages, or for that matter, from Hindi to English. So that happens for us as well. And slowly and steadily, this becomes a process which is automatic. We don't even get to know that we are doing it, and it becomes so natural for us that we hardly pay attention to it anymore. Then, so that's correct.
One way to jump into the pool, to jump into the water, is movies. Just watching the film. The one thing that I realized is that I remember now when I was a kid and I was learning English, it's more not worrying so much about the rules. Um, Students are learning, you're learning from Jay all the rules of English, and you're learning the vocabulary. But one has to sit back sometimes and not understand. You study, and then you watch the film, or you speak to, if you're lucky enough to be able to visit a place, or it's an English speaking country, you sit and you listen, and you'll find that if you give yourself the chance to just listen without worrying about rules, just listen, you begin to naturally pick things up. If you're watching a film, you don't understand the language, you'll be surprised that if you don't think about it, you don't try, you just listen and you just watch. At the end of that film, you will know certain new words. You will know how to say, please, I would like to order this, or whatever it is, and things become, so it's important to just kind of expose yourself. You learn, you have your learning session, and then you have your exposure session. I mean, at least for me, that's the way I feel is the best way.
Absolutely. I think very rightly you are saying, Miguel, about it, because that was one of the questions that came just even before the session, that we are learning, but where are we manifesting it? Where are we using it? And that becomes a challenge because it's like knowledge that is being stored, but we are not using it. So I think when we watch English movies and we pick up ready-made sentences from there and we use it in our daily conversation, that helps us in not only memorizing them, but also to use them at the right place. So that's totally the right approach to use it. And what you very interestingly mentioned about the listening part of it. Generally, the tendency is for any foreign language that we have seen across is that listening is the most difficult part among all the parts. So among reading, writing, speaking, and listening comes up as the most challenging one. People often tend to say that we are listening, but then we are not understanding as to what this person is saying. So I think what you have emphasized upon is the fact that you have to listen a lot. And there's a little
Mm.
fun part to it that God has given us 2 ears and one mouth. So I think listening should be done twice than talking. So that also is important that we have to listen a lot. And when we listen, ensure that you have your subtitles along so that you scaffold your understanding. Yeah, Miguel, if you want to say something on it,
Oh,
please.
what I was going to say, I don't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but what I was going to say
yeah,
is because communication is multifaceted. It's not just words, it's expressions, it's body language,
mm,
um, so on and so forth. One doesn't communicate in one way, which is why when I was lost in Jaipur, if I couldn't communicate in words, I communicated with my hands, or with my eyes, with body language. And that's why exactly watching film or just sitting back and listening and just trying to experience the language without worrying about whether you understand, you'd be surprised how much you learn.
totally. I think that makes a lot of sense when we go beyond the verbal communication as the non-verbal that comes into play, and that also helps a lot in expressing ourselves in a better way. And as you talk about looking at the native speakers or speakers of that language, you see as to how they speak, how do the formation of mouth becomes, where do they put the tongue, and to get the right sound out. That is a training because it is again like you're talking about the sports people who are training their muscles. It's again a muscle training that we have to do for ourselves, and that's only happening when we imitate the native speakers in a way that they would help us to get the right sound out. Especially when we make our brain hear the sound that's given by us, we are sure of the sound. But when it comes from the other person, at times it's tricky for us to understand. So I think we have to imitate this imitation, which is like shadowing effect or the copying effect. It does help us in a longer run, but it has to start from somewhere. So when we look and when we watch these videos, we look at those speakers, we see how they speak those words out. One, and as I mentioned about the transcription, which is the subtitling, which runs and scrolls on the bottom of the video, that helps us to scaffold the sound with the image of the word. And that kind of a strengthening helps us to speak the word in the correct way, and we can actually move ahead in the right direction, because listening is indeed a tough task for all the learners across the globe in terms of foreign languages that they would delve into. But then I think these practices can help them a lot. Right. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Miguel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving ahead, and now we would like to open the session for our dear participants. We always put this across that it is a session wherein we get a chance to talk with native speakers like Miguel and other speakers that we have had this far. So please feel free to discuss with them, to talk to them, and to raise your queries, your comments, your experiences. If you have had your experiences you'd like to share about your professional life, your personal life, or you have questions related to Dominican Republic, the childhood country for Miguel, because if that virtual traveling transports you into that country and you're intrigued to know as to how his childhood was, or his challenges in America, or his the professional life in terms of the translation or interpretation, please feel free to ask, because that would definitely bring a lot of clarity to our professional lives as well. I see one hand raised. It is Shubhashish. Yeah, Shubhashish, over to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Miguel, for your for sharing your your experiences, and it was really enriching.
It's my
Now I
pleasure.
have yeah, I have two questions. The first one you can say is partly a question and partly I'm criticizing. Don't you feel that exposure to diverse cultures creates identity crisis? So that is
Create
the identity
an
crisis. Like
identity crisis. No, no, I don't think so. I don't think
because
so.
what I feel is like when we get exposed and for example regarding Spanish culture, I would feel like more inclined to Spanish foods or their lifestyle. So what I feel is sometimes like it might lead to identity crisis where we actually try to adopt that culture and uh, For example, I'm a Bengali. Okay, and to be honest, I'm more comfortable in English than Bengali. Although my full background, family background is fully Bengali,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but it
No,
is a
no.
matter of that I can't write Bengali properly.
I think I understand what you're talking about. I think I understand what you're talking about. I can relate to what you're saying. Um, I was born and was raised speaking Spanish. That's my first language. And then I went to school at an early age because I was born. See, the thing is, the reason for the my country was under a military dictatorship for 30 years. When I was born in the 70s, right after the revolution, when things were very unstable. So there's a reason why the family needed to move to the United States. And of course, it was a more of a culture shock for other members of my family because they were older. And then, of course, the education system that I entered here is very much influenced by the UK. So there's a level of Anglicization, which I guess you guys can also relate to because India has a very close relationship to Britain. The United States has a relationship to Britain, and the Dominican Republic has a long relationship with the United States. So, am I British? Um, I have British attire. Am I Dominican? Um, I can understand what you mean by identity crisis, um, but I don't think so. It doesn't have to be that way. You are what you are. You come from where you come, and you take from whatever culture. I know that parts of my education are very Anglo-centric. I know that parts of my early education are very much Spanish. I know that we're not Spanish people. We're actually a different people from the Spanish because of the history of colonization. But in the end, you're you, I'm me, our families are our families. And the influence of different cultures is something that is natural. Um, the culture of your country was not the same 1,000 years ago. India is an ancient culture, much more ancient than the UK, but the UK is fairly ancient as well compared to Dominican Republic, which is part of what they call the New World, which is the countries that came about after the discovery of Columbus of the New World. So what happens is that cultures change over time. Cultures are enriched over time. I know that part of the Indian culture has some influence from the UK, which is permanent. It's not going to change. I spoke to a very nice person named Ajit, who has his family was in the military in India. He explained to me his family's history with the UK, how in the end, even after all the problems of the colonization, India's military is much stronger because of the training that they were able to receive from the UK. And so they do things in a way that was done in the UK, but now it's part of Indian culture. It's part of the culture of the Indian military. It has not caused the Indians to think that they're British. There's no there's no identity crisis there, but they've learned things from the British, which they've been able to embrace. And this is the way it is. During the course of time, you have to allow things to change and to develop. It's just the way it is. It has to be accepted, and it doesn't need to cause a crisis. If you happen to enjoy or you happen to find that something from another culture is enriching your life, or you find that the way they build the houses in Holland was something that you appreciate, go ahead and build your house in India in the Dutch style, and don't worry too much about it.
Thank you, sir. It was really like it was really nice to hear your ideas. And just one more thing I would like to ask. See, since when we learn a language, and I believe that language and culture goes hand in hand. So whatever language we are learning, we always it's better to know or get a taste of that particular culture. Now, talking about Spanish, like after learning Spanish, like maybe I would have interest in the Spanish culture or the Latin American culture. But what about, do you think that it is helpful to go into the rural or folk culture of that particular? For example, recently I came to know about gauchos. So
I have a
whenever
good
we learn Spanish, we are spoken, we are taught about their food
Chile.
habits, lifestyle of the, let's say, Spain or Latin American countries. But we never get an exposure to the rural or folk culture like gauchos or anything typical belonging to that uh, language or that community. So how do you like? What is your opinion? Do you think that it is important to give an exposure to that aspect of culture as well?
I'm sorry. One more
No,
time.
when we're learning a language, let's say when I'm learning Spanish, okay,
Uh-huh.
like I'm coming to know about their, the culture of Spain or the Latin America, like Colombian or Argentina, whatever.
Gauchos
Now,
are from Chile. Go on. In
now,
Argentina.
there's something typical about their folk and rural culture.
Oh, yes, 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 yes,
For
yes, yes,
example,
yes.
I gave you the example of gauchos. So accidentally I came across this. So
Yes.
don't you think that these cultures, which is rural or typically folk or rural culture, should also be highlighted or also should also be given an exposure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to tell you, that's something that when I have had time to travel uh, just to a place, let's say the UK. It's sad for me for people to tell me that, oh, yes, I've been to the UK uh, 20 times. And so I really know London. You have to leave London. The city, the centers, the urban centers of every country uh, are not to me, are not the soul of the country. You need to. It's very important if you really want to understand the nature of a people, where things come from, to exactly that. Go to the rural areas and try to feel, get a sense for where things come from, for the traditional culture, basically getting to the root of the culture. It's a very good point that you're making. You cannot just travel to the urban centers and expect to really understand. Because an urban center is a cross-cultural. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm a city boy. I'm very much, I live in an urban center. But coming to New York is not really understanding the soul of the American people. One has to go to other places to see the traditional culture as well. It's very important. Very good
Thank you.
point.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Subhashish, for those questions, and thank you, Miguel, for those wonderful answers. Because I really feel that what you rightly talk about for the point of identity crisis, I think you really said it in a way that from identity crisis to identity celebration. So that is what we have to travel, and we see it in a way that it's a flower pot which has flowers of all the colors, and that kind of an involvement to have all sort of flowers would embellish your flower pot, which is you as an individual. Otherwise, it would be as boring as having flowers of same color. So I think we all would appreciate to have flower pots which have flowers of different colors that would attract, and that should be our personality, which has prints of different,
You're a poet. You're a poet, Jay. Beautiful.
no, I think it's a mutual exchange that we're having with you. And when you talked about the Indian houses that have a Dutch appearance, I think what better can we have as an example to have those kind of influences? So I think it is all in our mind that how we perceive the others around us. Is it a threat or is it something that we embrace? And how hard we try, such is the world that even you raised as a point, Miguel, that India has changed, has evolved. But have we lost our soul? No, we haven't. So you keep our roots intact, we keep our souls intact, and then we move ahead with the pace of the world, which is inevitable. We cannot stop it. So that is true. Debashish, it was Subhashish, it was a great question, but I think that really makes a lot of sense. That connecting ourselves to the roots and then moving ahead. So I think looking at the sky and staying connected to the ground is kind of an approach that we have to move ahead with. Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Miguel, for the answer as well, because it was truly touching, and it really means a lot. Any other questions you have, dear participants? Feel free to ask. Yeah, Tanuja, you have a question. Please go ahead and mute yourself.
Question, but I was just inquisitive, curious about knowing if there are any similarities between the three cultures that you have stayed in. If there is one thing that is similar to all three of them.
Let me think. I think that one thing that is similar is the idea of sitting down to have a meal together. That's something that's universal and always a way to open. Everywhere I've been, not just the three cultures that you mentioned, but everywhere I've been, the time to sit down and kind of be in the presence of the divinity of the other, the humanity of the other, is at mealtime. Everyone in this world wants to sit you down and show you, this is our traditional food. This is how we've nurtured generations of my people. Do you feel that? This is how we love each other. So I think that's pretty much sitting down to a meal is a universal ritual, which is very important.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel, for that answer. Tanuja, do you have any other questions?
On the same line, if there's something that is absolutely poles apart in all these cultures.
That's very different?
Yes.
Very different. Let's see. What can I think of? I always think of similarities, not differences. Let me think. What is different? There are always things that are different. I know that in the Dominican culture, gift giving is very important. And then there's a whole ritual of showing appreciation for the gift. In the United States, you give the gift and someone says thank you, and then they throw it on the table. There are other cultures which we know. I don't know if in India or was it in Japan, but I know that if you give a gift that the person does not open it in front of you like they do in the US, that's considered rude. They put the gift away. I mean, it's not the best example.
No,
Sure,
totally.
sure.
Sure, absolutely.
Gives me a minute to think about it.
No, but I think that's also about the mindset that you have, Miguel, because you very beautifully put across to Tanuja. You said, "I don't look for differences; I look for similarities." I think that is your personality, and I think it's a challenging thing for you to find the differences. You rather move ahead with the similarities. That shows how blended we all are. We are all together. I think this point of offering gifts, presenting gifts, is important in all the cultures, and even in India. I'm sure Tanuja and everyone else will be in lines with me that whenever someone offers a gift to us, we thank this person with our heart, but we don't open it in front of that person. We keep it aside, and in the evening hours, once the person has left, we open it up and we relish that moment. So it's never in front of the other person. But now the trend is different. Now things are changing with youngsters. I mean, they would actually open it in front of them, asking them, should I open it right away, and express their emotions. So that's something that is coming up. So that's again the multicultural approach that we have in India. Tanuja, you'd like to say something on it?
No, I would just like to share one small experience.
Yeah,
I was just reminded with this because of the gift.
Yes.
During my stay in US, we happened to accidentally have forgotten our bank card in the ATM card. It's a very long ago thing, about 20 years ago. And those times you could just punch in once and you could withdraw money like thrice. And we forgot the ATM card there, and we just came back home. And the moment we realized, we were really, really upset, and we ran back to the ATM again. And by that time, somebody had already withdrawn the money. So we were very upset. Like, how could have we been so careless, etc., etc. But that was, I think, somewhere in November. And in the next year, July, we got a letter from the bank, and the person had actually returned the money with a note, thank you, because I really was in need of this money, and it was like God sent money during Christmas. And I'm sorry I had done it, but I could not see any other way out of it. And he returned the money with a letter, and it was like really, really touching.
That's a beautiful story. Beautiful.
Wow, beautiful. Indeed, absolutely. I think what reigns in the end is humanity. What reigns in the end is humanity and the emotions that we have for each other. I think that sums up the whole interaction for today, and even what we have as an intention. Great. Thank you, Tanuja, for sharing that beautiful anecdote, that story
Thank
of
you.
yours. And I think that shows us that in need, in time, when the time is such that we need people's help, and there is Almighty who comes and rescues us. And then, of course, we have to return it in some of the other way. That's our human gesture, and that's how the world moves ahead. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more thing regarding gift, giving gifts. One story that comes to mind is the gift of the Magi.
Right.
One story that comes to my mind is the gift of Magi.
Oh,
Right.
the gift, the
Yeah.
Magi, yes. The three kings.
William C.D. Porter.
Yes.
Gold,
Absolutely.
frankincense, and myrrh were the three gifts of the Magi, yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I think it's a great exchange that we all are moving ahead with. Now we have come to the end of our today's session. We have a little activity for our participants. Since we talked in the very beginning, Miguel, that it's a session wherein we enrich not only our cultural knowledge and our experiences, but at the same time we want to enhance our English speaking skills. That's also somewhere the intention, which shouldn't get lost somewhere. So we have brought some words for our English speakers, our English learners, just to help them with the pronunciation of these words, which at times happen in a different way. Again, I would say the same thing. We are not being judgmental about the way we speak, but then if we can tweak it a little bit in a way which is done as per the native level, we will always make efforts towards that. So the first word that you see on the screen is this one. If anyone could just raise a hand and tell us how would you pronounce this word, and with our expert for the day, Miguel, we'll check the pronunciation in the end. So yeah, we have Tanuja. Tanuja, could you help us with this word which is wrongly pronounced, and how would you pronounce it the right way?
Relatively.
Okay, relatively. Okay, any other help from participants? Yeah, Smitaji, you would like to say?
Relatively.
Okay, right. Miguel, if you could help us with the right pronunciation.
Relatively.
Right. So it's relatively.
Relatively.
Yeah, relatively is what we would say. But at times we have heard in Indian context, we tend to say relatively. So it's relatively. Relatively is what we would speak this word accordingly. Okay, next one. Anyone? All right. So I see a hand raised. That's yeah, Shubhashish.
It's reservation.
Could you speak again?
Reservation.
Reservation. Okay, Tanuja, you'd like to say it again?
Same. Reservation.
Same. Reservation. Yeah. Miguel, if you could just throw some light on the pronunciation of this word.
Reservation. Reservation.
Thank you. Reservation. Yeah. So at times we say reservation. So it is a reservation. Reservation. All right. Moving to the next word. All right. Anyone among participants? You could. All right. Tanuja, over to you.
Itinerary.
Okay. Once again, could you try, Tanuja?
Itinerary.
Okay. Miguel, if you could help us with the pronunciation, if it's that.
Itinerary. Itinerary.
Right.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, so there's, but that's perfectly okay, Tanuja, because most of the time we tend to say itinerary is what we say, but I think there's a little stress on the r in between, which is itinerary. There's a r as well, and then re. So
Itinerary, yes.
Itinerary, right? Yeah, perfect. And so these are some of the words that we use, and we hardly pay attention at times of the right pronunciation, but nevertheless, the next one, anyone? We'll ask Subhashish this time. Subhashish.
Negotiation.
Right, Miguel?
Yes.
Negotiation.
Yes. Negotiation. Negotiation.
Exactly. Negotiation. Absolutely. Right. Although, again, I would say the same thing. We are not being judgmental about any kind of pronunciation. It's just that it would be great if we spoke it in the right way. That's the only interest. All right. Next word. Anyone for that? Let's give chance to others as well. I'm sure Tanuja is there, but we have another hand raised. Arti, I would like to listen this word from you this time. Arti, you'd like to say something?
Yeah. Devastation.
Okay. All right. Would you retry, Arti, again?
Devastation.
Okay. Anyone else? We'll check with Miguel afterwards. Smita ji, yeah, please go ahead.
Devastation.
Okay. Miguel, could you help us with the pronunciation?
Very good. Devastation.
Right.
Devastation.
Exactly.
One more
So that
time.
is-
Devastation.
Thank you, Miguel. That's correct. Devastation. Yeah, we tend to say devastation or any other way. And that's normal. That's absolutely okay. No one corrects us. But we've seen that with passage of time, we tend to see how these words are said. In our whole learning process, I mean, people don't correct us because even they say it's the same way. So this is the interest of this whole session, and even otherwise, that whenever we watch English speakers speak English, we tend to see as to what is spoken the right way. And I think we have one last word for the day. That is, yeah, this one. I think it's visible to you. Please, anyone who wants to say could raise the hand. Is it Arti? You'd like to say, Arti, this word for us?
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
reiterate? Not sure about it.
No, not a problem. Could you retry, Arti? Be more confident. Be more confident, please.
Reiterate.
Okay, we will keep note of that. I'm again and again saying Debashish. That's Subhashish. Shubhashish, please go ahead.
Reiterate.
Okay, and we'll
Reiterate.
listen. Reiterate, and we'll listen to Tanuja, and then we'll check with Miguel. Tanuja.
Iterate.
All right, Miguel, if you can get us the right pronunciation.
Reiterate. Reiterate. One more time. Reiterate.
Absolutely. Thank you, Miguel. Reiterate. So this is something that is so common to us that we have been using these words for many years now, and there's a little change to them, but that is how we work on our pronunciation part of it. I think that was a great sharing of ideas with our expert for the day, Miguel. So I think everyone would help each other as well in doing the right pronunciation. With that, we have come to the end of our today's session. I would extend my sincere thanks to Miguel. Thank you so very much, Miguel, for your wonderful insights.
Thank you very much, Jay, and thank you, class.
Thank you, sir, so much for staying up for us. And
Absolutely. Yeah, it is 1:30
My
at his place
pleasure.
and still
Thank
he's
you,
up.
sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear participants, for your enthusiasm and your participation in such an active way. We are really thankful to you, and we hope to see you next time with a new session. Thank you, everyone. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much, sir. Have
Thank
a nice day. Have a nice day,
Yeah.
Mr. Miguel.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
day.
Thank you. Take care.
And I think it's good night for you.
Yes, it's good night for me. And good day for you. Wonderful.